You thought you'd have it figured out by now. Not everything, but at least the big things. The career path, the relationship status, the sense of who you are and where you're going. But 29 hits, and instead of clarity, there's just this quiet, persistent panic. The feeling that everyone else crossed some invisible finish line while you were still figuring out the route. And now 30 is approaching like a deadline you forgot about until it's too late to prepare. She wakes up on her 29th birthday and the first thought isn't excitement or gratitude. It's calculation. 1 year left. 365 days until the number changes and suddenly everyone will look at her differently. Until she'll look at herself differently. The 20s were supposed to be for figuring things out. But what happens when you get to the end of them and you still haven't figured it out? What happens when the buffer runs out? The panic isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with a breakdown or a crisis moment. It lives in the background, humming quietly under everything else. It's there when she updates her LinkedIn and realizes her job title hasn't changed in 3 years. It's there when she scrolls through Instagram and sees another engagement announcement from someone she went to college with. It's there at family dinners when her aunt asks, with that particular tone, when she's going to settle down. As if settling is something you schedule. As if life has a timeline everyone else managed to follow. He sits at his desk and realizes he's been staring at the same spreadsheet for 20 minutes. Not because the work is hard, but because a thought crept in that he can't shake. Is this it? Is this the career he worked toward? The one he's supposed to ride into his 30s and beyond? Because it doesn't feel like an arrival. It feels like he's still waiting for something to click. For the moment when he looks around and thinks, yes, this is where I'm supposed to be. But that moment hasn't come. And 30 is getting closer. The thing about almost being 30 is that it exposes every decision you didn't make. Every path you didn't take. Every version of yourself you thought you'd become but somehow didn't. At 25, there was still time. Plenty of it. You could pivot, restart, try something new. But 29 feels different. It feels like the window is closing. Like if you haven't figured it out by now, maybe you never will. She compares herself constantly, even though she knows it's pointless. She sees people who seem to have it all together. The friend with the promotion and the house. The cousin with the partner and the plan. The stranger online with the business and the confidence. And she wonders what they know that she doesn't. What they did right that she's doing wrong. Because from where she's standing, it looks like everyone else got a map and she's just been guessing. But here's the part nobody talks about. Most of those people are guessing too. They're just better at hiding it. The promotion came with doubt. The house came with debt. The relationship came with compromise. The confidence is mostly performance. Nobody has it figured out. They just look like they do. And that illusion becomes the standard everyone else measures themselves against. He goes to a birthday party for a friend turning 30. Everyone's drinking and laughing and making jokes about getting old. But there's an edge to it. A nervousness beneath the humor. Because 30 feels significant in a way that 29 doesn't. It's the line between still young and officially adult. Between figuring it out and supposed to have figured it out. And nobody wants to admit they're on the wrong side of that line. The pressure comes from everywhere. From parents who want to know when you're going to give them grandchildren. From society that treats 30 like a checkpoint you either pass or fail. From the internet, where everyone's highlight reel makes it look like life is a steady climb toward success. And from yourself, because you internalized all those expectations so deeply that you forgot they weren't yours to begin with. She lies awake at night making mental lists. Things she should have done by now. Things she needs to do before 30. Things she's running out of time for. The lists get longer and the time gets shorter and the panic gets louder. What if she doesn't figure it out in time? What if 30 arrives and she's still in the same place? What if the next decade is just more of this uncertainty, but now with the added weight of knowing she should have moved past it? The irony is brutal. Your 20s are supposed to be for exploration, for mistakes, for figuring out who you are. But then you get to the end of them and suddenly you're supposed to have answers. As if there's a switch that flips. As if crossing from 29 to 30 magically transforms confusion into clarity. But it doesn't work that way. Growth doesn't happen on a schedule. Understanding doesn't arrive with a birthday. He thinks about where he imagined he'd be at 30. Back when he was 22 and 30 seemed impossibly far away. He had a picture in his mind. Not specific, but a feeling. Established. Confident. Secure. The kind of person who knows what they're doing. But 29 looks nothing like that picture. He's still figuring out what he wants. Still questioning his choices. Still feeling like an imposter in his own life. And that's where the real panic lives. Not in the age itself, but in the gap between expectation and reality. Between who you thought you'd be and who you actually are. Between the timeline you imagined and the one you're living. That gap feels like failure. It feels like proof that you're behind, that you wasted time, that you're not measuring up. But what if the timeline was always a lie? What if the expectation that you should have everything figured out by 30 was something we all agreed to believe because it gave structure to the chaos? What if there's no such thing as being on track because there's no track to begin with? She starts to notice something. The people who seem the most confident in their 30s aren't the ones who figured everything out. They're the ones who stopped believing they were supposed to. They let go of the timeline. They quit measuring their progress against arbitrary milestones. They realize that life doesn't follow a script, and trying to force it into one only creates anxiety. The panic of almost being 30 comes from a fundamental misunderstanding. The belief that age equals readiness. That turning 30 means you should be a finished product. But nobody is ever finished. Growth doesn't have an endpoint. You don't arrive at a version of yourself and stop. You keep changing, keep learning, keep figuring it out. At 30. At 40. At 50. The discomfort of not having all the answers doesn't go away. You just get better at sitting with it. He has a conversation with someone in their late 30s. He asks, half joking, when it gets easier. When you stop feeling like you're faking it. The answer surprises him. You don't. But you care less about it. You realize everyone's faking parts of their life. Everyone's figuring it out as they go. The difference is that you stop thinking that makes you inadequate. The shift starts small. She stops measuring her life against timelines that were never hers. She stops comparing her behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel. She stops treating 30 like a deadline and starts treating it like what it actually is, which is just another year. Just another step in a journey that doesn't have a prescribed route. The panic doesn't disappear overnight. But it loses some of its power when she realizes it's based on a premise that isn't true. That premise being that there's a right way to do this. A right age to have certain things figured out. A right timeline that separates success from failure. But there isn't. There are just choices. And every choice comes with trade-offs. And nobody's timeline looks the same. He turns 30 and the world doesn't end. Nothing dramatic changes. He doesn't suddenly feel more adult or more certain. But he also doesn't feel the crushing weight of having failed some invisible test. Because he's starting to understand that the test doesn't exist. That the pressure was self-imposed. That he gets to define what success looks like for his own life. The quiet panic of almost being 30 is real. It's common. And it's completely understandable given the messages we receive about what life should look like by certain ages. But it's also optional. You can choose to stop buying into the idea that your worth is tied to hitting milestones on someone else's schedule. You can choose to let your life unfold at its own pace. 30 isn't a deadline. It's not a finish line you cross and immediately need to have everything together. It's just a number. And the sooner you stop treating it like a judgment, the sooner you can actually enjoy wherever you are in your journey. Even if that place is messy. Even if it's uncertain. Even if it looks nothing like what you planned. The truth is, nobody warned you about the panic of almost being 30 because most people were too busy pretending they didn't feel it themselves. But you're allowed to feel it. You're allowed to be uncertain. You're allowed to still be figuring it out. And you're allowed to arrive at 30 exactly as you are, without apology. Because the only timeline that matters is yours. And it's never too late. It's never behind. It's exactly where it needs to be.